I could not be more excited about this conversation that I'm going to have with some friends of mine than I am. I think this is something that every teenager should listen to and should heed and should really, truly understand it. How should teens witness to others? Guys, I'm really excited about the guests that we've got. It's some of my friends. First of all, I got Ethan Spence. So Mark Spence has worked with Ray Comfort and Living Waters for years. Seems like a couple centuries now. Been traveling with Ray, which makes it seem even longer. His son, Ethan Spence, is just the young man that just loves God and wants to see others come to know Christ as their Savior. So excited to have you on here. Can you guys go ahead and jump in here with me, unmute your mics, and show your video so everybody can see those beautiful faces that you've got there. Got Ethan. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I am blessed beyond measure because I got all you guys on here to share what I think is just kind of no-brainer stuff, but what the world and what young Christians and what teens today would be like, you want me to do what? So talking with you guys about how you've gone out and shared your faith with other people. So you're telling me you've actually talked to somebody on the streets and you've actually done some kind of gospel presentation, you yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's definitely doesn't come easy. It's scary. I used to go out with my dad so often. So my dad, Mark Spence, I used to go out with him so much. He would always share the gospel, and I would always be the guy just kind of listening on the side. I used to go actually every week, every Friday, and I didn't actually do it until 7th grade. I used to do it. I used to just go every week for really as long as I can remember. But it wasn't until 7th grade is when I really was like, I got to do this. This is a call for the believer, and it shares a testimony. It says a story about someone when you're not gonna preach the gospel. I heard someone once say, how much you have to hate someone to not share the gospel. Wow. And it's just,
that's a
convicting
powerful
stuff,
statement, man. That's a powerful. I can't wait to hear about that journey, and that's what I want people to hear about today is what took you from point A to point B and that journey. Hey, joining you is one of your friends that really, you talk about being born in evangelism as a third generation guy doing it. It's kind of cool. Danny Zwayne. Danny, how you doing tonight, bud?
I'm doing good today. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate it. Your dad, Emil Zwayne, is now the president of Living Waters. So kind of like Ethan, you were kind of brought up in this apologetics and evangelism type environment, weren't you?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a great experience, but there's one thing to hear it all your life, but going out and actually practicing that is definitely something important and something I've learned over the years for sure.
Well, again, I can't wait for that journey of that, and I got some questions for you guys in a minute. And I thought, you know what? It'd be kind of neat to invite my own son, Jordan, to this. So my own son, Jordan Hovind, who, like you guys, have been brought up in the ministry, and I thought, he's got some stories to share. He's got some funny stories to share. But Jordan, thanks for joining me, buddy.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks. Where are you at over there? What's going on? You got a really nice setup there. Where are you at?
Oh, I'm just in my sister's room, Just got to use their room.
Good old sister's room. Got to love that. Well, I'm glad they're letting you use their room tonight, Jordan. That's really cool. Hey, my other guest tonight is Jeff Phillips, and I met Jeff. Jeff, I got to tell this story real quick. I met Jeff over in Louisiana. I was speaking at a conference. Oh, I got to pull the video up. I'll pull the video up in a minute if I can find it. Speaking at a conference, and I met your youth group first, and I got to tell you, Jeff, I was blown away with your young people. It was 7:30 in the morning. I get to the church where this all-day apologetics conference is going to be, And there is a line out the door of students waiting to get in the conference because the doors were still locked. They weren't allowed to even get in yet. I turned my phone on. I walked up to them and I said, what in the world is a whole bunch of students doing here at 7:30 in the morning for an apologetics conference? And Jeff, your students said to me, they said, oh, well, our youth pastor takes us to New Orleans and has us do evangelism on the streets. And so we're coming here to learn how to give better answers for what we encounter on the streets. And I just sat there in awe and I went, if only every youth pastor would do something like that. So Jeff, that was my introduction to who you were and to the ministry that you have with students there in your area. Thank you for joining me tonight, buddy.
Hey, it's great to be with you. It's really neat. You know, I was there, but man, those students came running to me. They were so excited. But I have to be honest, they were excited because you brought up Ray Comfort, and they got to meet Ray Comfort on your phone. So, but yeah, it's great to be with you tonight. Looking forward to the discussion.
Well, that is why I've got you here. I want to know, okay, what should other youth pastors be doing, and how do you encourage your kids to get over that fear factor? So I just kind of want to unpackage that whole conversation. But kind of to start, I want, if you feel like talking about anybody who wants to talk about this, just feel free to jump in. I don't think some young people understand the urgency and the need. And I get it, the fear factors there of, okay, if I'm going to share my faith, I got to defend my faith, and I don't really know how to do that, so maybe I shouldn't even share in the first place. But before we even get there, I'm curious from Jeff, Danny, Ethan, Jordan, what is it in you that made you realize, okay, it's worth me not being ashamed of the gospel of Christ? That is something that I, as somebody who's claiming the name of Christ, I need to not be ashamed of the gospel of Christ, so much so that I'm willing to share it even though I am scared. How did you even get to that point? I don't know who wants to go first, but what is it that made you go, okay, this is so important, I need to figure out how to do this? What are some thoughts or some verses or sermons or something that you guys have heard on that journey to being willing to share your faith?
I know for me that the missionary, I forget which one, but he went to the island with a bunch of Indian people, I think, and he was just striving to get the gospel to them by like dropping Bibles from the plane and just dropping a bunch of gifts, just so that they would hear the gospel and that they would not spend an eternity in hell. And that's for me too. Whenever I think about people, I always think about, well, I'm going to spend an eternity in heaven, but will he? So then I'm like, oh, well, I better go tell him about the gospel. So, yeah.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah. For me, man, I used to be like so scared. I mean, I still am scared, but I used to be so scared about what if I don't have like the right answer to a question? So I've always had that desire and that knowledge that I have to get out and do it just because I was so grown up around it. But I was really held back by that fear in the back of my mind. What if they ask a question I don't know? But something that actually like gave me confidence and boldness is you know, it's that famous verse, Romans 1:16, that you even shared it, that I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation. The part that got me is that the Bible says it very clearly and very, very specific, that it's the gospel that is the power of God unto salvation, not answering their questions. So I could try to answer their questions. What I call that is getting caught up in the reeds of evangelism. The point of evangelism is to preach the gospel. If you haven't preached the gospel and it's just kind of an apologetical sword fight, then really I think it's missing the mark. I think there is a place and a time for getting into apologetics and you know, maybe getting into philosophical questions and answering them in evangelism. But the point of evangelism was to go out and preach the gospel. Wasn't that the call from the Lord? Go out in all the world and, man, proclaim the gospel and make disciples of every nation. It was not go out there and answer people's questions to their sufficient minds. Because really, what is sufficient in the mind of the atheists? And because, man, we're just going to give them evidence. They're going to interpret it in a different way. Really, if you preach the gospel, you have to realize that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. And that's what really did it for me. And that's what gave me confidence to go out when I recognized that it's the gospel that's the power of God. So as long as I preach the gospel, I'm not going to mess up.
Well, I'm curious as to kind of how we do that and creative ways to do that as teenagers, and how should teenagers do that. And I want to ask you guys some thoughts on that. Danny, Jeff, any thoughts on kind of the apathy? I mean, kids are so addicted to the phone and so addicted to wanting to be, even Christian kids, it's a trap that we fall into of, I want to be famous. I want a viral video. I want to, I want people to see me. I think if we could just do these things just right, man, the world will see me. When in reality, how many viral videos have you seen? And do you care a lick about those people on those viral videos? No. And so I think, how do we get kids over this apathy and this thought process of, the world says this is what success looks like, but when you actually examine it, it's like, that's not really what success looks like. Where you are always a winner. You are always successful, whether the person converts or not, when you share the gospel. What is it that gets us through the apathy of not even caring about the lost?
Well, I think, the attitude that you're talking about, this apathetic, self-centered attitude, it's antithetical to the gospel. It's just the opposite of the gospel. And so, I think the remedy to that is a healthy understanding of who Christ is, a solid understanding of the gospel, and a student. And look, there's not a gospel junior for teens. It's the gospel. And so a teen who gets a hold to the reality of 2 Corinthians 5:21, he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we could become the righteousness of God in him, the great exchange. A teen who gets a hold of the glory of God and the power of the gospel, as Ethan was talking about, and they have a proper understanding of who God is. They love God. I mean, it's simple, but it's just a reality. We love God rightly, we will love others rightly. And we will be, as 2 Corinthians 5:14 says, compelled by the love of Christ. It'll no longer be duty and something that I have to do. It'll be something from the inside out that I'm compelled by the love of Christ to do. So I think it starts with the individual's relationship with Christ and the understanding of the gospel.
How has that been for your kids as you've actually gotten them to? What does your teaching and preaching look like in the youth, with the youth, in order to get them to understand that? Is it just you're communicating that on a regular basis, or you're making sure that that's the foundation? What does that look like? How do you do that?
Well, in our teaching, our Sunday school, our small groups is a chronological study of the Bible. So we're going through the Bible chronologically. It has an apologetics dynamic to it as well. Our Wednesday nights and our others are typically expository. I teach through books, but you teach through the Bible, you're going to be confronted with Christ and the gospel over and over and over again. And when it comes to the New Testament, it's hard to miss the fact that Jesus says, "Follow me, and I will make you into something. I will make you fishers of men." It's hard to ignore the Great Commission. It's hard to ignore the Book of Acts, and it's going to come up, and when it comes up, we have to be challenged with the truth. We have to take the truth personally and make personal application. So specifically when it comes to evangelism, discipleship, we teach. We want them to have a solid understanding of what the Great Commission means, what it looks like. Absolutely.
I tell teens all the time, if you want to learn about your faith, just go share your faith. And I promise you're going to want to learn a whole lot more about it, because you're going to get questions that you don't know the answer to. And it's going to be like, I'll look that up and get back to you, okay? I'll be right back with you on that. So if you want to learn your faith, just share it and you will learn it. I guarantee it. Danny, do you happen to remember the first time you kind of really either shared a tract or shared the gospel with somebody? Like, do you remember how about like how old you were or what that was like or anything? Or was it, no, Eric, I've been doing this all my life, man?
Oh yeah, so for sure, the first time I remember going to share the gospel with someone, I was 7th grade. I actually walked up to the guy, handed him a tract, and I asked him if I could talk to him, and he didn't speak English, so that was an interesting experience. But I can't say I remember the first time I was actually able to have a full conversation of sharing my faith, but I will say that as I've shared my faith and as I've preached the gospel, it's come more alive to me than before, where when I'm preaching to someone the holiness of God and the judgment to come if they don't repent because of his holiness and our sinfulness, I begin to appreciate the gospel more in my life in just every area, really. And so, yeah, I can't remember the exact first time I really had a conversation with someone, but I will say that just over the last few years since I started, it's had a huge impact on my life.
That is really cool. Really cool. Okay, I want to show you guys a video real quick that I've got. I got a couple, just because I want to share a little bit of the story of what we've done. Just first of all, and Jeff, this is for you as well, right? We all have kind of learned and gleaned from Ray Comfort, Way of the Master, going through that series, right? Is that Ethan and Danny? I know you guys have had to glean from that, but I know for Jordan and myself and Jeff, it seemed like your kids, and that's right. When I walked up to your kids, they talked about Ray Comfort, and I said, "Oh, let me call him." And so I called them, and they were blown away. They're just like, "Oh my goodness!" So Danny, you're, as you know, do you still do that with your grandpa? Is it still pretty impressive to talk to Grandpa, Danny? Is that a lot of fun?
Eric, you were their hero for a while, man. You were great.
I connected them to Ray, which made
Right.
me amazing. I got here. Let's see here. We love going to the beach. And so I think I got a video here for you guys. We love going to the beach. Our family does, because we're just a couple miles here from Pensacola. And so often there are large gatherings at the beach. Of course, we just had a hurricane, so not anymore. But on a regular basis, man, you can easily go down there, have a crowd of people, and be out there witnessing. So this is my daughter, Stephanie. And I mean, we'll just go, we'll hand out tracts, and that just opens up conversations. I got another cool, it's going to be a little jumpy on me. These are huge files, so sorry they're not quite perfect videos here. Check this one out. I know you only see his back, but when he was just a wee bit smaller, that's Jordan talking to 3 adults about the gospel of Jesus Christ. I couldn't believe it. I sat there, I'm like, dude, son. Sometimes we'll set up booths at different events and hand out tracts like that. And then I think this one will work. I don't know if it'll play well. We'll find out. So we have what's called gallery nights in Pensacola, downtown Pensacola, where at night on a weekend, a whole bunch of shops and stuff open up, and they got all kinds of people come in and put on displays. And I got a little interview. I think, let me see if the audio works. Let me see. I hope I'm not in trouble for this one. Okay, we'll see.
Oh, wow.
Jordan.
Hi, we're passing out tracts to everybody in the downtown, and that's what we're doing.
That is Jordan. Jordan, how old were you back then, buddy?
Well, first of all, I don't even remember that, kind of. So, I was probably like 2.
Well, you did good, man. So for years, we've been out just doing that, just sharing. And it started with, the kids passing out tracts. I remember I was trying to find it. Had one video of my girls walking together, and they're handing out tracts. And my daughter, Angie, was probably 7, maybe 8 years old. She hands a tract, and this guy goes to stop her. And I was like, oh, dude, he's about to ream her out. Because it was an old guy, looked like one of the old Grouch kind of guys. And I thought, he's about to yell at a 7-year-old for sharing her faith and shoving her faith down his throat. I was like, it's going down. So I'm ready to just put my phone down, put the camera down, and go intercede. And he goes, are you the one doing these? Are you passing these out? And she goes, yes, sir. He goes, great job. I love this. This is fantastic. And so I just sat there with the camera and stayed back. And I was like, oh, whew. Oh, that worked out good. But I love passing out tracts. So teenagers, if you've never shared your faith, I want you to hear from these guys and go, okay, how hard is it really to share your faith, especially with some of the tools that are available to us today? So I love tracts. Ray Comfort has these the $1 million bill tracts. He's got the $1 trillion Trump tracts. I got a variety. I'll tell you more about those in a minute. But what about you guys? What's your favorite way to share the gospel or open the conversation or introduce?
Well, my favorite way is the round to it. It's, do you want to hold it up, Dad?
Bam, I got one right there.
Yeah, those are so cool because you just say, hey, have you gotten one of these? And they say, no. And then you say, well, here you go. This is a round to it. So have you ever said something, but then you said, when I get around to it, now you have a round to it. And they laugh. And then you say, oh, yeah, it shares the gospel on the back. And then they walk away. And then, yeah. So that's my favorite way.
That is a super easy way to open the conversation. Love that one. Anybody else got a favorite track or favorite way?
I just like the classic million. Man, it's just so good because it's just money. People like they look up when they see money and they kind of get depressed when they find out it's not. One time I was in a really there are some places where this does not work. I was walking through a place that was just hit with poverty, and we were walking around and we're giving out tracts, and we were with like a leader, like a youth leader, and he gave us these tracts to hand out, these ones, and we're giving these out, and then we were like, you know what, probably isn't the best idea in like a place that's like not, so know your audience, but this is a great one. It gets people's attention, and there's such a good gospel presentation on the back. There's also like little comic books. This is all by Living Waters, shameless plug, and those are my go-tos. The
comic books are easy to pass out?
Yeah, for sure. I love doing that. I love approaching people, and a lot of times I don't approach with the track, but I make sure I leave the track in their hand when I'm leaving. Like, say I approach someone and I open it up just saying, man, I'm just going around with some friends, or if I'm by myself, I'm just asking a couple controversial questions, wondering if I could get your answers on some of these. And first controversial question would just be like, where do you think you're going to go after you die? And it's just a great segue into the gospel, go through the law. Most of the time people say they think they're going to go to heaven, and they think because they're a good person. So that's kind of typically what I do. And then if people have to go, say they say like, I don't have time for this, I say, all right, well then just here's this really quick. And I just hand them the tract. So make sure they have that in their hand when I leave. But even if they don't, it's all good.
You got an opportunity to present the truth. So your one-liner in the poverty section wasn't, you think that's disappointing, try hell. You didn't do, that wasn't No. Okay. All right. What else? Jeff or Danny, you guys got favorites, or like the way you approach it or open up the conversation? Because let's face it, this can be a difficult thing to kind of like, oh my goodness, I'm about to ask them about God and about eternity. And when you think about it, we know it's one of the most important things to do, but when you have that first line or that first thing to hand them, or when you have a way that you go, here's how I'm opening, win or lose, fail or succeed, this is how I'm going to open this one up.
Yeah. I think that's the most difficult part, is how do you start a conversation? And I think tracts are huge. So we use a lot of the Living Waters tracts as well. I've used the wallet tracts, the cell phone tracts, but I had a friend who wrote his own personal tract, and it has a question mark on the front. And so, I'll usually start with this and say, hey, can I give you this? It answers the most important question in life, where we'll spend eternity after we die. Do you ever think about that? And, usually they'll say, yeah, I do. And then that's a platform to go to the gospel, that way. And one thing, our students, you were asking a while ago about how our students, once they began to share, how were they more open to share? In the beginning, very scared. How do you start a conversation? But once they began to utilize these tracts and got them into the conversation, they were much more comfortable to carry those conversations on. And some of them took the EvangeCube know if you've seen the EvangeCube. You can walk through this. It opens up, tells the gospel story. It flips through. Works really good with children or young people. But man, I had some of our students in New Orleans who we trained them one day on this, and we went down to the Riverwalk in New Orleans, and a couple of the students just really connected with this. They were sharing the gospel with the EvangeCube to adults more comfortably than even I could have. So yeah, those are some of the ones that we've used.
That's cool, man. Danny, you got any favorites, or is your pretty smile all you need to make the introduction?
Yeah, I really like the $1 Million tracks, like I think you and Ethan were showing. They're pretty good opener. It usually catches people's eye because it looks like money, and yeah, it's usually just as simple as handing it to them and being like, "Hey, did you get one of these?" And a lot of times they'll ask like, "Hey, what's this?" And then you get to explain what's on the back, and a lot of times that opens up for longer conversations regarding the gospel.
That's very cool. Heidi mentions in the chat. Heidi, thanks for throwing that in there. I haven't looked them up. World Missionary Press tracks are awesome too. Marlis, if you want to find a link to that and throw that in the chat so people can see that. I haven't gotten to see those. If you're watching and you've got favorite tracks that you use, would love for you to tell us about that in the chat and just let us know what you like to do. But hey, bottom line is each one of you has figured out a way to go, you know what? I'm going to open the door and open up a conversation. I'm going to give something or start the conversation somehow with a complete stranger. And these are with strangers, right? I mean, you guys are each walking up to people you've never met, people you don't know, right?
Absolutely. Most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I just think that's so cool. Jeff, how did you go about, before you go to New Orleans, before you do that, how did you go about training the youth for, all right, guys, we're going to do this. We're going out as a group and we're going to share the gospel. What was that like?
Well, I mean, it was teaching, giving them a solid understanding of the Great Commission, solid understanding of the gospel, and then a healthy dose of the Way of the Master videos. We watched, they're very helpful. You watch Ray Comfort, Kurt Cameron, all those guys share the gospel, and we would watch the interviews and then we would discuss them. Now, why would they say this? And now, what scriptures did they go to? And so they could really examine not just what they said, but why they said it and how they got to the gospel. The hardest thing for me anyway, and I think our students would agree, is going from the physical to the spiritual. And how do you make that swing? And just seeing that. But a lot of those videos, discussions on that. And then we also got them to prepare their personal testimony, their salvation testimony. I challenged them to write out their personal testimony and prepare to be able to share it within 2 minutes. Most people, even if they don't want to listen, will give you 2 minutes. If you ask, will you give me 2 minutes to tell you the most important story of my life, the most important thing that's ever happened in my life? Most people will give you 2 minutes. So ask them to do that. They would prepare that. And then from that point on, it was, we did some role playing, which is very difficult, really. It's a little more exciting and fun to be the lost person in that than really be difficult. But yeah, we did some of that. But then once we got to New Orleans, it was just jump into the deep end of the pool. But we promised them, look, I'm not going to throw you in an uncomfortable position. We're going to put you in groups where there will be one person who is very confident and comfortable carrying on those conversations. We would try to go in groups of 3 or 2 or 3. Sometimes we had to be 4, and that one person would be responsible, but they would all be praying. But they knew that at any point they felt comfortable or wanted to jump in, they could. And it wasn't long before they were jumping in and sharing a portion of their testimony, or they were beginning to carry on conversations. So at that point, the training just kind of happened in real life.
Yeah, once you're there on the street doing it, that really is where it's like, okay, this is where I'm going to figure this out.
It is.
And I love what you said, how the students would pray for the person sharing, because most of the time we really do think this is us having to go do something, when in reality the battle is taking place in the spiritual world.
Yeah, we would meet the whole weekend. We would come down on Thursday afternoon. We'd stay through Saturday. So we would have equipping sessions where we would, equip and teach out of the Bible, equipping them. And then sometimes we'd teach them about the EvangeCube or use a track or whatever. But we would pray and we would pray for divine encounters. And so as someone was sharing the gospel or initiating conversation, they would be challenged to pray and take it seriously, because, I mean, we've got to remember it is God who is reconciling the world to himself through Christ. We just get to be a part of that, a vessel which God uses. We get to be the one who communicates the gospel, but it's God's work, and it's a spiritual deal there, spiritual warfare. And so we challenged our students to pray, but it wasn't long before they began to speak up. Now, we've done it 3 years now, so the third year is very different than the first year, much more comfortable in the third year. But it's just been exciting. You know, you see a football player who only gets to practice, never gets to play in a football game. The guy's going to be bored, and he probably will quit the team. You know, Christianity without Christ is boring. There is no Christianity without Christ, by the way. But, you know, Christianity that's not walking in obedience to God's commands, you're not experiencing the fullness of life in Christ. So when you do step out in faith, out of your comfort zone, and you abandon yourself and obey God, it's exciting.
Well, that's all the time we have for today on this conversation. I would love for you to hear the rest of the conversation. If you're not yet a Creation member, go to creationtoday.org and sign up today.